Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Thank you so much for joining us from all over for our Spring 16 release preview webinar. We're very excited to have you here today and very excited to show some of our favorite features coming up in the Spring 16 release. So before we get started, all of our webinars, as you know if you've joined before, all of our talks and all of our webinars do start with a forward-looking statement, formerly the Safe Harbor statement. And what this is saying is not to make any purchasing decisions based on functionality that is intended that you may see today. So future-looking statements Samantha and I will be making. Do not make any purchasing decisions based on that, only based on what's available today. So I did mention Samantha. I'll introduce myself. I'm Leanne Templeman. I'm a Senior Admin Evangelist at Salesforce. I can be found at Leandroid on the Twitters. And I am joined by the amazing and awesome Samantha Reddy. Sam, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Well, good morning, Leanne, and good morning, everyone on the line. My name is Samantha Reddy. I am a Senior Developer Evangelist at Salesforce. You may recognize me from the Udacity video, or perhaps we've met at Dreamforce. We are going to be going through some awesome admin and awesome developer features today. So if you're an admin on the line right now, we're going to go through developer features first, but I think a lot of this will be really awesome and interesting to you too. And then if you're a developer, stick around for all of the I guess it's an hour, because Leanne's going to be showing some great demos that I think will benefit you as well too. So this will be a fun webinar.
Absolutely.
And because we are a social business and business is social, you can find us in all these different social networks. So these two Twitter hashtags or Twitter handles for Salesforce devs and admins are a great place to find new content coming out, hear about events in your area, see some great stuff that we're doing, like webinars and events. Just a note that Salesforce admins doesn't have an I. I thought that was a typo, and I had to double check that.
There's no I in admins.
Exactly. That's great. That's amazing. I think that was intentional now. There's also the Facebook page, which is another great place to see a lot of great social stuff going on, as well as our YouTube channel. So if you happen to jump off the line in the middle of the webinar, you can find this recording there later, as well as every webinar we've ever done and sessions from Dreamforce. And if you want to read up more about the release itself, because we don't have enough time to go through all 500 pages of the release notes today, you can check out the release information on the Release Readiness Community group, where they have the ability to sign up for your own pre-release org, download the release notes, or ask questions in the chatter feed moving forward. So I'd encourage you to check out the salesforce.com/new features to get some of the highlights and post your questions to the success community. So more on questions before we get started. If you are going to the Release Readiness group, this bit.ly right here is a really good place to get you there quick. Feel free to post questions throughout the webinar. You don't have to wait until the end. If you use hashtag AskForce, that'll make it easier for the folks that we have here at HQ to be able to find your questions and answer them sooner. But if you have questions after this webinar completely, this is the same place you should be posting them to, and other people will hopefully get to those immediately. Yeah, so Leanne and I will be answering questions at the end of this webinar for anything that comes in the chat window or on the Release Readiness group. But until then, I think we're going to go through the webinar. Does that sound good, Leanne?
That sounds great, Sam.
All right, so we have a packed agenda for the next hour. I'm going to start off by showing you a demo and going through some cool stuff with Visualforce and Lightning Experience, then talk about some of the new Lightning features for developers, and then going through another quite a few different API enhancements around Apex, streaming, SOQL that have come out in the spring release. And then I'm going to hand it over to Leanne to talk about some other cool features. What are you going to be telling us about, Leanne?
So I'm going to be sharing some very cool features for admins, specifically around changes to how you can roll out Lightning and changes how you can monitor, for admins to be able to monitor security and health in their organization, some Picklist updates that we're excited about, as well as updates on everyone's favorite process builder and app builder. And then as you said, we'll be finishing off with Q&A. Now, all you admins on the line, though, I want you to make sure to stay tuned, especially for those of you who are admins who code or aspiring to code or work with developers. Sam's got some really awesome demos coming down, especially around the Visualforce for Lightning experience and some really cool tools that are very relevant to you too, admins. So pay attention.
Yes, and some of Leanne's demos around Picklists and Process Builder can also save developers a lot of time because now it can be managed declaratively with the platform. So love getting to see this stuff come together. All right. So right now I'm going to start off by talking about some of the cool developer features in Spring 16, and some of the first enhancements that I want to talk about are particularly around Visualforce inside of Lightning Experience. So we released Lightning Experience in August, and some of the biggest questions we've been getting from customers is what can we do with our existing Visualforce pages? What can we as developers start doing that's supported and bringing some of our existing customizations over? And so I want to show you some of the new things around Visualforce inside of Lightning Experience. So first off, previously before Spring, this navigation menu was not customizable. But now as of Spring, we can not only customize that with any object or Visualforce page or Lightning component that we want, but we can tailor that by profile. So I'm going to go into the setup by clicking on that cog in the corner and going to Setup Home, and then using this quick find here. If I type in navigation, previously you'd only see Salesforce 1 navigation to modify the mobile app, but now we have navigation menus, which allows you to change the Lightning Experience navigation. And so if I go click on New, I'm going to make a beer app. Yep, it's 10 a.m. California, it's time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag over some of my custom objects, so beers, breweries. I also have a Beer Explorer Visualforce page that I can drag over here. And I'm going to opt in to also show home, so if you forget to do that, ET can never go home. And last, I'm going to do some chatter people, because they might want to know about these breweries.
So Sam, I have to stop you. This is too cool. So this is a drag and drop interface, because I know you're talking about the Visualforce pages you're adding or tabs you're adding, but also we've got custom and standard. So this is something that admins and developers can use.
Absolutely, and this is going to be great for people all over your company too, because in that next step, admins can be able to apply different navigation layouts for all of these different profiles. So in this case, I am a system administrator, so I'm going to make this available for me, but I could create a completely different layout for all the different salespeople, marketing people, and this is only going to get more complex as future releases come out. So like how now we have the app picker that allows you to toggle between different apps. This navigation menu is going to get more complex to allow you to have different app experiences and be able to have different layouts for different users. So this is super, super great. So after I click Finish, I have that beer app ready to go. If I refresh Lightning Experience, I should see this tab on the left refresh with my new custom objects and Visualforce page. So here I have access to beers, I have access to the people, and I also have this Beer Explorer. So this is that custom Visualforce page for being able to filter by all of the different beers that I might want to see. Now, where else can I add this Visualforce page into Lightning Experience, you may be asking? Well, first, let's say I actually go into that Breweries tab. Maybe I want to put this same Explorer onto my brewery layout to see all the beers possible. Well, if I click on that cog in the upper right, I can edit this page with Lightning App Builder and then use a Visualforce component to be able to drag that Visualforce page directly into the layout. So if I take this Visualforce standard component, put it right there, it's going to show me all the different Visualforce pages that have a standard controller of this object, just like when you're putting a Visualforce page onto the page layout. And of course, if you want to change the size, this is all customizable. I can also add a label for the title. And if this Visualforce page happened to already be in the page layout in Classic, that would automatically show up down here in the detail view on the record home. So those are two places that you can put your Visualforce pages directly onto a record home layout. Now I'm going to leave this page really quick and also show you, we just were looking at App Builder, let's take a look at App Launcher. So if I click this little tic-tac-toe board up here on the right, it's going to take me to my app launcher. And so that's going to show me all of the different custom apps that I have available, whether they're connected apps or apps that you built declaratively, or maybe even web apps. But I'm going to click into my Beer Explorer app, and so this is something I'd see in the App Picker in Classic. And so these are all the tabs in that tab set. And again, I have access to that Explorer tab, which again takes me right back to this Visualforce page. So a lot of different ways that we can access Visualforce inside of Lightning Experience. Now the one thing I want to mention, last thing, is in the setup, when I go to my pages, just like in Salesforce 1 where you need to actually enable this page to be available for mobile, you have to check this box to make it available for Salesforce 1 or Lightning. So even if you have the tab in the navigation, maybe you have it pulled onto a tab in Salesforce 1, even if you have everything configured correctly, if this tab or this checkbox isn't checked, it's not going to show up, and that can be kind of a pain in the butt when you think you have everything set up properly. So make sure you check this box for any Visualforce you want to put on Lightning Experience or Salesforce 1. So great. All right. So just to recap, Visualforce and Lightning Experience is beta. We have Visualforce GA, obviously, but Visualforce with Lightning Experience enabled is still in the process of adding more functionality. So I would encourage you to check this out now, maybe think about the places that Visualforce would fit in currently, but there will be more features coming out in the next release around Visualforce and Lightning Experience, so stay tuned. Now, I mentioned putting Visualforce in the Lightning Experience navigation menu, but another thing that's really huge for Visualforce in this release is the idea of detecting a user context. If you're, say, trying to manipulate the CSS around a Visualforce page for a different view in, say, Lightning Experience or Classic, you'll want to be able to detect that user context. And previously, you would use the SForce object, which was available inside of the Salesforce 1 or Lightning Experience container. But now we have an even more supported way using this UI theme context variable, which can give you the granular difference between Salesforce 1, Classic, or Lightning Experience, and you can tailor your UI or navigation accordingly. I also showed you a couple other places you can use Visualforce, which were already possible and you could do now in Winter, which is in the App Launcher and the Page Layout, App Builder, and overriding custom actions. Now, just a few considerations around Visualforce inside of Lightning Experience. Every time, and some of these are more design considerations, but these aren't necessarily caveats, your header and sidebar are automatically suppressed inside of Lightning Experience, which is actually a great time saver because you don't have to write any code to manage that header depending on your environment. Also around navigation, if you think you're going to use your Visualforce pages in both places, you should be doing your navigation in JavaScript so that you can try and handle that all using similar functions rather than a page reference, which wouldn't really work inside of Salesforce 1 or Lightning Experience. But if you're using a Visualforce page inside of Classic, you should use window.location. But if you're in Salesforce 1 or Lightning Experience, you should use the sforce.1 utility object to manage your navigation. And then when you're actually creating those navigation URLs, they shouldn't be static. You should be doing those dynamically. It's kind of more of a best practice anyway, not just in the case of Visualforce and Lightning Experience. But if you're doing this in Visualforce, that's the URL that's the JavaScript for being able to define the action you want to do. And then in JavaScript, you can use that sforce navigate to sObject method in order to handle navigation. Now, if you're styling your page, like maybe with the Salesforce Lightning Design System, because you're putting it in Lightning Experience, you can either use that UI theme variable or the sforce object to detect your user context, and then you should adjust your style for either environment, because as we all know, if you put standard Visualforce into Salesforce 1 or Lightning Experience, it kind of looks like a second-class citizen. So if you haven't checked it out, look at the Salesforce Lightning Design System for being able to bootstrap some of your app styling. And just a quick note, some of the actions or related lists are currently deprecated or unavailable. Actions specifically, any override for the object list action, for example, won't be accessible in Lightning Experience because it doesn't exist in Lightning Experience. So take a look at what standard action overrides are available, and those are the ones that'll work. Also around blacklisted related lists, that's just because we are currently porting over our CRM and all that other schema into Lightning Experience. So if you don't see it, it's mainly because it is currently only available in Classic. And then finally, Apex iframe, simply because of the architecture of how Visualforce is even put into Lightning Experience. Visualforce is already an iframe. We've deprecated Apex iframe, so you can't have this inception of an iframe within an iframe. Yo, dog, I heard you like iframes. All right, so next, other Lightning features that are available. We also have this awesome new component called Aura tokens. These are Lightning component tokens that allow you to create global variables accessible to all of your components to be part of your design, similar to the design tokens used in the Salesforce Lightning design system. So as your design evolves, all you have to do is change these Aura tokens. Like, for example, if you want your font face for all of your components to be a different font, you only need to change it once, and that'll propagate throughout all of the different components that are using these tokens in their CSS. So a useful user experience design resource. We also have improved client-side caching. So we've added this so that your browser can improve page reload performance by avoiding those extra trips to the server. And this is available really only in Lightning Experience. But if you want to disable it, which we wouldn't recommend, if your company's policy, say, doesn't allow browser caching even when it's encrypted, this is totally disableable. That's a word now. All right, so this is a feature that I am super excited about, and it has a lot of great additions to come, and that's the ability to take your Lightning components that you're building and surfacing them anywhere. While this is still beta, I think that the most relevant use case for Lightning Out would be inside of Visualforce pages, because it's going to allow you to be able to take those components and leverage them both in Salesforce Classic and in Lightning Experience. You'll be able to take
Oh, I was going to say, so Sam, you and I, when we were talking about this feature and how some of these developer releases are really relevant for admins, this is really important for admins to be aware of, especially if they're working with developers, because as you told me yesterday, it allows them to at least know that there's development work that can be done that can be applied to both Classic and Lightning. So if they're in, a progression path with Lightning and in the process of deploying Lightning, they don't have to just develop for one environment. Am I right?
Totally, exactly. And as admins are trying to find their champions internally and be able to have that rollout plan, this is going to be a huge tool for minimizing development work in both environments. So super, super big win for both developers and admins. And it is, I'm going to show in a second, really simple to be able to take existing Lightning components and surface them directly into Visualforce. You'll be able to do any sort of communication between the two, either on the client if you wanted to do that, or handle it all inside of Lightning 2 using Visualforce as your container. But this will allow you, as you're making that migration, not all Visualforce pages make sense to turn into Lightning components, so you might still want to use Visualforce, but this will help you port Visualforce pages into Lightning components, use Lightning components inside of Salesforce Classic. Whatever your use case may be, there are quite a few. So let's take a look at what this looks like inside of my developer org. All right, so here I am in my recruiting app. I can see I'm in recruiting right here. Let's take a look at what this would look like inside of Salesforce 1. I want to first show you my Lightning tab. So for anyone who has tried using the 1/1.app as of winter, you may notice that it takes you to Lightning Experience instead of Salesforce 1. And this is something that can be mitigated simply by changing the user agent. So that'll still allow you to test Salesforce 1 inside of the browser if you're trying to do any sort of custom development debugging. So I'm in Lightning Experience right now, but by inspecting the element and then changing the user agent to, sorry, I think that GoToWebinar is making my computer a little bit slower. I'm going to change this to an iPhone 6 and then refresh the browser. It should, instead of being in Lightning Experience, show me what the Salesforce 1 app would look like. So I can go to my Candidates tab, and this tab is just a Lightning component tab. I can scroll through these different candidates, and if I were to click on their name, it would take me to their contact record, but maintain that navigation breadcrumb to be able to go back. Now, what would this look like inside of Classic? Well, if I go to the Job Positions tab and click on a given job, I can click on this detail page button at the top, and you'll notice from the URL as it's loading, this is a Visualforce page. But it's the exact same component that we were looking at before, and when I click on this name, it then takes me into Classic. And so this is the exact same component used in both places. How did we actually do this in Visualforce? So if I open up the developer console, I'm going to open up that Visualforce page. So I have my candidate carousel page. Just a standard Visualforce page. I removed header and sidebar, style sheets. The first thing relevant to Lightning Experience, or Lightning Out, is this Apex Include Lightning standard component. That's going to include all the resources necessary to do Lightning Out. I also have some CSS here so that that component takes up the full screen. I have this div, which doesn't have anything in it when the page loads, but that's going to be where once the component is rendered, it's going to be put into that DOM element. This is what you would do if you were, say, trying to use the UI theme. I've commented it out because I'm in a winter org at the moment, but in Spring, what you can do is use this code to render specific areas of your UI. This is that user UI theme variable I mentioned. That's for detecting exactly what app context you're viewing this page from. So if you're Classic, you can create a UI specific to the Classic theme, or Salesforce 1, or Lightning Experience. Or if you don't want to use this global user UI theme variable from Visualforce, you can use what's been traditionally recommended since Salesforce 1 came out, which is detecting the SForce object. And so if this SForce object exists, that means you're in one of the Lightning Experience, either the Lightning Experience or Salesforce 1. If it's not, then you're in Salesforce Classic. But actually using that Lightning component is just a little bit of code. So once I've detected where I'm viewing this component from, all I need to do is declare the component that I want to use in the page. Now I do have this one app, which essentially is just declaring the dependencies necessary for me to be able to load these components. Think of it as a bridge telling my page, hey, these are the components that are allowed to be on this page. So if I open up that app, you'll see it's really simple. There's no markup. It's just declaring that one dependency of that component for the candidates carousel and also extending Lightning Out. But this is globally available. If you didn't have this, the Visualforce page would get a 404 error when you're referencing the component. Now, going back to the page, all I'm doing after I've declared that app that has those dependencies on it, then I can create the component itself. And so the first thing that I do is put the name of the component that I'm trying to use on my page. You can pass in any parameters, which essentially fill the attributes on your component. In this case, I'm sending in the user context, which is the container that I'm viewing it from. Then you specify the DOM element that you're trying to populate with this component. So in this case, I'm doing that candidate carousel div up here. And then finally, you have a callback function, which can be used to be able to set more values or maybe do more DOM manipulation, whatever you might want to do after the component actually loads. But in this case, I'm not doing anything except logging that it was created to the console. So let's take a look. So that's basically it. That's really simple. I have my simple Lightning component. It only takes a few lines of code to put it on the page. And then there you go. So a few other API enhancements that I want to talk about before handing it over to Leanne. First off, there have been quite a few things around Apex testing in this release. So you probably have lots of Apex classes that you run together regularly, like maybe when you're doing a deployment, or maybe when Salesforce releases a new version, you have significant sets of Apex classes you might want to run together. And now you can create test suites to run those all together automatically instead of having to select those individual relevant classes each time you run a test run. Now on the flip side of that, large runs of Apex can sometimes take an excruciatingly long time. And waiting for a test run to finish only to find out that a lot of your tests have actually failed can be super irritating. But now you can configure those test runs to stop executing new tests after a given number of those tests fail, which will be a huge time saver for deployments. We've also fixed a couple different bugs that were existing in the test case scenario. First of which being comparing a currency value to a decimal in an Apex test. That won't throw an exception anymore. Also, the mixed DML operation error for when you were, say, doing multiple asynchronous callouts or asynchronous jobs with the original transaction. You might have seen this mixed DML error when you didn't see it in production. This bug was also fixed. Also, when writing test classes prior to this release, the test.start test and test.stop test should reliably receive its own block governor limits and then reset all of those limits to 0 after the stop test. But in some cases, you might still run the limits afterwards. But now this will definitely reliably receive its own block, and all per transaction limits will be reset to 0 once the test has been stopped. Now we also have the ability to query the FlexQ item object and be able to find the position of any of those jobs within the FlexQ. So you can do some manipulation there or simply output some of that data. And so once you want to inspect any Apex job, you can use that asynchronous Apex job ID to grab more information about that job directly from the FlexQ query. And so these are a couple examples of being able to find the position of that async job in the FlexQ, and then also find all batch jobs in general along with their associated metadata. Now around SOQL, there are a few big nuggets in this release. The first of which is your ability to query for users' private folders. So previously this was totally private, but using the all private query scope, now you can see not only the folders but also what's within them.
So Sam, this is something that we were excited about on the admin side too, because especially those admins out there listening who maybe have been admins or owners of an org for multiple years, or an org that's been around for a while, sometimes there's a lot of, say, private dashboards, private reports, and so now with this enhancement, they're going to be able to, as I understand it, write a query, a SOQL query, find those, and then do some cleanup through Workbench. So it can really help admins who are looking to do some kind of org cleanup and org maintenance of those private records.
Exactly, yeah. So I completely forgot about Workbench for a second. Yeah, this is totally something that you could be managing completely out of Workbench to be able to audit and clean up old data. And some other additions to SOQL that we had this release are things like the distance query, which previously was used as, say, like a sorting filter or for being able to order by things. Now you can actually get the distance itself returned from the query, so you could say output exactly how many miles a contact is from an account, for example. We also have some functions for being able to format different data types in the select clauses. So these should now reflect the appropriate format for the end user given their locale and show the proper date, time, and currency, for example, that they would see in the Salesforce Classic user interface no matter where they happen to be. Don't know what just happened. All right, and now a couple other streaming API enhancements. This is really awesome. As of Spring, you now have the ability to replay generic streaming events. So prior to Spring, there was no way to replay events, and this made streaming great for things like UI updates, but not ideal for things like detecting changes and synchronizing data. But now subscribers can receive events anytime rather than be restricted to just after they're sent. And so you can grab events from the last 24 hours and choose which events you want to actually retrieve from a few different options. So now these event objects actually have a field for the replay ID, and if you say were to supply the replay ID in your REST call, then it would put the head at that replay event and then give you all of the events also subsequently after that. If you fed it -2, that's going to subscribe to all events in the last 24 hours, and a -1 would get you all of the events after that subscription. And so really, if you want to grab any event over the last 24 hours, that's cool, but as soon as that 24-hour period is over, those get immediately thrown out. But this makes your ability to send outbound messaging much more durable and also have ability to detect state changes. So think about with outbound messaging the way it is currently. You're basically making these asynchronous calls where you only send the final state, and it can only really be performed on workflow objects. But now you can detect those state changes throughout the day, sending those pulses out every time that the state is changed. And it can work off pretty much anything that's API accessible, so making this a lot more useful for outbound messaging. Now, something pretty much almost identical to generic streaming is replaying push topic streaming. The only difference here is that you can specify the exact channel that you're trying to replay push topics for. And so this is really great for updating an external system when something happens. You know, like maybe you're trying to do some sort of data synchronization and you want to see all of the cases or case activity over the last 24 hours. This is going to add that layer of durability like I mentioned, and it's really going to allow you to be able to create a better integration using streaming events. Now, this is more in line with a synchronization system where you can update external systems with various state changes, and it's just part of an incremental progression of how we're going to see the streaming API evolve over time. So first off, we had our first layer of streaming where you create that pub subsystem for reacting to events. Now we have the ability to determine state changes and also retroactively assess events. And then the next stage is extending that out to an external messaging system. So it's not just streaming, but you can also publish and consume events in Apex and then push events off of the platform. So this is beta in spring. It's not automatically turned on in your org, so if you want to be able to use this feature, just contact Salesforce and they will definitely enable this for you. All right, so finally, my last set of API enhancements. First off, JSON support for bulk API. Yay! Also, REST API, friendly URLs. This is going to allow you to do more with your REST API calls by being able to traverse through parent records or certain parent records to be able to retrieve and update, delete, do a lot of CRUD on that record without having to run multiple calls. And big announcement, Wave has gone GA. The REST API is GA as of this release. So all the main objects from Wave are exposed. These are golden representations of everything, and it's versioned as of version 36. This is the same API that the Wave team is using internally, and it's based on the Connect API. So if you've been doing development on force.com, you will find this API very familiar. So how can you get started with it today? We have a link for being able to spin up a DE org with Wave enabled in it. So check out this link if you haven't played around with Wave yet. You can get your own DE org with Wave. Then you can follow through this Wave trail and maybe even take a look at this Wave developer guide in order to get started building cool analytics with Wave. And, I mean, for all of these different features I was talking about today, you can try out Trailhead in order to do things like the Lightning Component trail. There's Visualforce for Lightning Experience if you want to check out that trail, and Wave, like I mentioned. And I just want to give a shout out to Chris Duarte and the docs team. They go through, like, with a fine-tooth comb through the docs to make sure that Trailhead is up to date and all of these things in Spring are reflected in the documentation in Trailhead. So it's phenomenal. As of the rollout, just make sure you check out Trailhead, and all of these new features will also be included where they're relevant inside of Trailhead. Okay, so with that, Leanne, I want to hand it over to you to be able to go through all the cool stuff you want to show us for admins.
Awesome. And I love the Chris Duarte and Trailhead shout out. Trailhead is amazing. We'll be talking about that a little bit at the end of our admin presentation as well. So I hope everyone, all of our admins who code on the line, feel like they learned a lot about Visualforce and Lightning Out. And now we're going to talk about some admin features, but also features that are relevant to the developers on the line, right? It's really important to understand the declarative abilities and functionality of the platform just across the board. So first, we're going to go straight to a demo. Let me switch over here. So the first thing I want to point out with Spring 16 is, and this is relevant to everyone who has not yet turned on Lightning or is still kind of experimenting with turning on Lightning. In your classic setup screen, you have an option called Lightning Experience. So this came around in winter, so you may have seen this page before. But we've got new additions to make the entrance into Lightning even easier. We've got videos and resources about Lightning, but we also have a couple features I'm very excited about, specifically the ability to preview your org in Lightning. So maybe you have sandbox or developer environments with Lightning enabled, so you are comfortable with Lightning, you have had a chance to click around, but with this new feature in Classic Setup gives you the ability to do is to look at your existing production org, your metadata, your data in Lightning, and to see what that will look like. So if you're at a company or you're managing an org that maybe has a lot of customizations or maybe a lot of custom fields and page layouts, and you want to experiment and take a look at, say, what your page layout would look like in Lightning, what that looks like as you bring over those custom fields, what those custom objects look like, you can do that now with this preview. So this is a great tool both to get a really hands-on experience with what your production would look like in Lightning, but then also to potentially have executive buy-in or to be able to give those people at your company who care about what that transition would look like, be able to give them an actual hands-on view of here's really what it would look like. I know because I tested it, I looked at it, I know what our org would look like. We also have, of course, Trailheads. We've got links to our Trailhead trail that enables you with the best practices for rolling out Lightning experience, and of course you get a badge. Now, when you're ready, you can go ahead and enable the Lightning experience. So I did see a question come through. I might answer questions as we do this. In someone's sandbox, they have Lightning enabled. You can just flip this back if you want, if they had asked how you turn it back off. But also, if you want to go back to Classic once you've enabled Lightning, you always have the option to toggle back and forth. So if you don't want to necessarily turn Lightning off, but you want to have the option to go back and forth, in your user profile up here, you'll always have that option, or you have that option right now to go back and forth to Classic and Lightning. So we're in our new Lightning home screen, and I'm going to go straight to Lightning Setup because this is a demo for our admins and developers. So a couple updates that I'm excited to share from Spring Release. And as Sam said at the beginning, this is not exhaustive of everything that we have in Spring. This is a few that we're especially excited about. If I search objects here, I can go to the Object Manager. Object Manager was in Winter 16, but it gives us the ability to manage all of our objects, our standard and custom objects, in one place instead of having to go through multiple setup trees. And when I go to one of those objects, let's say our account page, I can go ahead and start adding fields. Now, at the beginning of the webinar, I promised we'd talk about some cool new Picklist updates, so I'm going to show you those right now. So I'm going to select Picklist. I'm adding a custom field to my account. And I have the option here, this is a new option, to use global Picklist definition or enter values manually for Picklist. So previously you would have said, they want Nordic skis. Let's say we're imagining we're a ski company here, right? So we're Vasi skis, so Nordic skis or backcountry, right? So we would have been typing those in manually. Now, with global Picklists, I have the ability to select customer segment, and that's a predefined set of Picklist values that I built in global Picklist. So that's predefined, and I see this checkbox here that's also new called strictly enforce Picklist values. So this is a second element to Picklist updates in Spring 16, and it's called restricted Picklists. This gives you the ability to limit the values or the access to the values in Picklists from the API, which means that once you select it as a restricted Picklist, and global Picklists are always by default restricted Picklists, but if I was creating just a regular Picklist, this means that if someone's doing a data import, they cannot accidentally create a bunch of new values for my Picklist just because there's typos in the CSV file. That's the primary use case there that I see. So it really removes that access from the API, and it helps you enforce your data security. So I'm creating my Picklist here, visible, add it to my page layouts, and
save. Before you go on, if an admin were doing a data import and they had some dirty Picklist, wow. You know what I mean? Some improperly spelled Picklist values. What would happen on the data load?
So let's imagine great question, Sam. So let's imagine you've got a data load, you've got a CSV file, and a very typical scenario is maybe there's you've got a pick list for, let's say, this customer segment, right? Like small, medium, large. And maybe you accidentally have a bunch of typos in that column in the pick list that say, small with 3 L's or something like that, or they just don't match the criteria. if it's not a required, if you don't have any validation rules in place that make that make that pick list required, then those values would just not populate. So if it's not required, those records would still import, but they wouldn't populate. If it is required, I believe then the individual records would fail. So if you have kind of one of those very long validation rules that makes pick lists required on a record, then the record itself would fail to load. So maybe only like 5 out of 10 of your records would load.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Whereas in the past, you might just end up with 6 new pick list values, which was never fun.
Yeah.
So that was the first feature or first 2 features really that I'm excited to show you. Another one is called Health Check. So both of these are features that you have access to, or the pick list updates as well as Health Check. You have access to them in Lightning and in Classic. These are not Lightning specific. And what Health Check does is it automatically checks all of the password policies, session settings, network access settings, and configuration. It checks all of the settings in your Salesforce org and checks them against the standard kind of accepted Salesforce baseline values. So if you think about those as kind of our industry standards for password policies or for session settings, and it checks against it and it calls out what are your high-risk settings, where maybe you're deviating very far from the accepted or recommended baseline, medium risk, and then you've got your greens where you're like you're in the clear, you're good. So this is not only gives me one view of everything, but it's also actionable. So I've got links here to go to that part of setup that lets me update that. So if I'm an admin and I'm checking on the health of my organization, I want to make sure that we are in line with all the recommendations, industry recommendations. I can go ahead and make those shifts and make those updates as I go. So I just added a trusted IP range. That was one of my recommendations that came under medium risk. Now when I refresh it, I can see I'm creeping up from 50% to 67% up on the health check against the baseline. Now again, if you're in a different industry, you might want to check like your specific for HIPAA, things like that. You want to check like your specific kind of recommendations, but this is checking against all Salesforce recommendations. So I'm going to switch back to slides really quick. I promise there's more demos. So I just want to cover what we talked about and where you can find it. So that we started in the Lightning Experience Migration Assistant. So this is additional tools that are in Classic Setup that give you resources to evaluate Lightning, to view your production data and metadata, links to your Trailhead, and really give you that ability to look at what your org would look like in Lightning and also learn more about Lightning. In Security Health Check, we saw that we updated our recommended IP ranges. This is available for Lightning and Classic, and it's an immediate analysis of all of those password policies, session settings, and network access configuration in your Salesforce org. So not only is this, I think, kind of more efficient for admins, it gives you all of your securities in one place and a good high-level visual on what your values are, but also this enables our admins. I mean, admins are business analysts, right? Admins are the owners of their Salesforce orgs as far as that health, that security, and this really gives you the tools to go to your organization and say, hey, we are at 100% of the Salesforce security recommendations, and we are meeting that standard. That's something that we've built out in our organization. So it really gives admins kind of the keys to ensure that they're able to deliver that internally. And we talked about global and restricted pick lists. So restricted or global pick lists, often called universal pick lists, although in Salesforce and setup when you're searching, you have to search for global pick list. They were very popular, over 44,000 points on the Idea Exchange. So this is really exciting progression for kind of pick list tools, declarative customization tools, because it allows admins to manage a recurring pick list in one place. So if we imagine that customer segment pick list, for example, we might have that on a lead. We might have that on an opportunity, on a custom object like projects. We might have that on accounts, maybe even campaigns. It might be a piece of information that we want to track across multiple types of objects in Salesforce. And what this does is it allows you to ensure universal or global values across all of those objects and also maintain them in one place. So no more, going and updating like 8 different custom pick list fields when you do have, say, a new customer segment you're marketing to. You're able to just update it in one place and it'll automatically update everywhere. We saw restricted pick lists, or the ability to create a restricted pick list, and that really will help us keep our data clean, right? So if we have users importing, for example, using importing tools or data loader tools, importing leads records, things like that. Many of us who've done a lot of data imports have probably stumbled across, or at least had to clean up after someone maybe accidentally created some values because it wasn't a really clean CSV. So this will remove that that access to create potentially dirty data. So I'm going to switch back over to my demo org. And we'll go back to our Lightning setup. So a couple of features that we talk a lot about because we love them are Process Builder and App Builder. So I want to start with Process Builder. So I'm typing Process Builder into my search window here, or search in setup here. And we've been, every release since Process Builder came out, we've had additions to Process Builder and changes with Process Builder, and we're very much hearing you. So there's some really cool efficiency changes to Process Builder in Spring 16. One of which is the ability to drag and drop criteria. So this has, I think, a huge use case for, as you're writing maybe complex criteria trees out, this gives you the ability to change that. If, say, a new business requirement comes in our, let's say, our new employee onboarding, new hire onboarding process here, we may have a new business requirement around maybe like a small shift change or a manager change or something like that that we want to trigger this process. And that might be a criteria that casts a really small net, so we want to make sure it's at the top. So previously we would have had to rebuild this entire thing, but now what we're able to do is just drag and drop and maybe add a new criteria here and then drag it back up to the top. So it's just definitely an efficiency win. It makes it easier to create multiple criteria and to edit those existing criterias. We also heard that you wanted to be able to see fields on hover. So sometimes when we have field values, like a reference value here, it would have a very long string in the name. And you wouldn't necessarily be able to see that final item on the string that tells you what the field is. So now we have hover on all of our fields. So as I'm going through here, if I can always just hover here, it's on the field and see that full name. And when I'm ready, if I clone this, this is another update here. I have my name, my API name, my description, everything's automatically populated for me. So we're definitely have made some improvements here in the efficiency and ability to kind of quickly move through creating processes, to edit those existing processes, and to clone them with less administrative burden. Now let's go take a look at our opportunities, and I want to show you a little bit of the Lightning UI enhancements, not all of them. I'll talk more about them later, but a couple of the enhancements I have to point out because I think they're fun and I think they're really useful is this new global actions plus sign up here on the top. And so what this gives your users the ability to do, and you, is to create notes and tasks in this docked environment here. So I could create a note from anywhere and I could say, maybe my call notes, it's going to suggest records I viewed recently. And if I notice at the bottom here, it's automatically saving as I go through. And if I were to change where I am in Lightning, I still have those docked experience of having those records I'm working on. So for example, if you're writing a whole to-do list for yourself or writing a lot of notes and you need to look at multiple records to write those notes, you can now do that. And if you want to set them aside for a moment, but you're not quite done with them, you can always minimize the docked windows.
So Leanne, are these the same global actions that were available inside of Salesforce 1?
So I believe we're calling the Salesforce 1 publisher actions again.
Oh, or, publisher actions.
I have to check. Yeah, I have to check. I think there's a naming difference. So changing the mobile one, there's a mobile one or Salesforce 1 changes where you can have actions in the bottom. This is different. So
okay,
because this has just those four, I have to play with it a little bit more.
Great.
But so I can just minimize it here. And then also one thing that we heard from you wanted, it was the ability to do inline editing. So we have in our details page here, we have our inline editing where we can access, without double clicking, we can access all of the various fields. And one thing that I definitely liked because sometimes you're writing big complex notes or updating a lot of fields and we do get distracted. If your user tries to go back to another tab, they'll get the prompt to stay on this page that you have unsaved changes. So again, just increasing some of the usability pieces for your end users. Now, I want to jump into App Builder really quick, and then we'll wrap up shortly. Last thing, so App Builder is in pilot in Spring 16. It's still in pilot. It's in all your development environments. It is a very easy pilot to get to. All you have to go do is search for App Builder in your DE environment or your admin playground and just click the checkbox for record home, customize record home. But we also have updates with it. So maybe you played with it last fall and got your hands on App Builder, but now we have one of our new updates to App Builder is the ability to customize your tabs. So as I'm clicking through this main panel here, I can see all of my tabs, so I can determine what my default tab is, as well as where I want those tabs to live. And I can add a tab. So if I want to say add a feed tab, or maybe I want to add a related list tab, I can add that here. Something I want to point out that really directly relates to what Sam's been talking about is the ability to add custom tabs. So you can also add a custom tab here and have these customized tabs, and then you could bring components down into this tab. So this really is an awesome update to Record Home or App Builder for Record Home because it gives you the ability to have highly customized record pages. So say on your account page, for example, you may want to have a tab that has all of these various components that tie to product or project history, like implementation history, project success, project deadlines, things like that, that gives you that view. But a sales executive would probably want to spend time in a maybe sales health tab on the account page that's going to give you a high level, maybe you have components that are giving you a high level of your opportunity health and revenue that's come in. So it's really giving you a lot of power as admins and developers to deliver a customized experience and all of that information while not completely overpowering that real estate that you have on the screen.
Yeah, compared to Classic, it seems like admins have a lot more tools now to really manipulate the user interface to be more user-friendly. Like before in Classic where you could only build sections and maybe drag things around multiple columns, there's so much more flexibility to create custom interfaces for different users.
Right, and that's a great point. Like even just something as simple as moving the related list relative to the details, that's something that used to require rebuilding the entire page in Visualforce, right? And so now admins and have opportunity to do these customizations and to work with their developers and to build components to really have a customized experience. And even if you're not, building components yet, even just being able to change around where those standard components live gives you a lot of customizations. So let's go back to my slides. So Process Builder, so we saw drag and drop criteria reordering, reusing names and descriptions. Process Builder ideas on the Idea Exchange had almost 9,000 points. And so Process Builder has not been around that long. That's a lot of points. So we definitely look at that. If in every release notes, there's a section called You Asked For It, which gives you some insight into how our product owners are looking at those ideas and incorporating them into future releases. So we just talked about App Builder, Customized Record Home. I encourage everyone who has not yet, or maybe everyone who hasn't done it recently, to get into their DE environments or their admin playground environments and to play around with adding sets of tabs, maybe creating some custom tabs with custom components. There's a lot of great free components to experiment with on the Lightning Exchange, or you can go through and build some components, use the Lightning Design System, build a Visualforce component. There's a lot that you can but I really encourage everyone to go to that pilot and to get comfortable with it so that when it is GA and you are using Lightning, you already have all these ideas and skills built up so you can deliver really great customized pages for your users. And there's more, and we won't be showing these, but I just want to make sure for those of you, especially admins out there, that if you are using Salesforce campaigns and person accounts and opportunity teams, those are all now supported in Lightning. So I encourage you to go to the release notes, read about that in more detail. Every release, there's more functionality supported in Lightning or available in Lightning, as well as Lightning-specific updates. There's new changes to list views in Lightning, allow more customization abilities to list views to change column width. We saw inline editing. We saw the new global actions button. And we didn't show this because I ran out of time, but I encourage everyone to spend some time playing with the dashboard filters that are available in Classic. And you can view them in Lightning. You can build the dashboards in Classic to add custom filters to dashboards. You can add multiple custom filters to dashboards now. And when you turn on Enhanced Dashboards for Salesforce 1, you can view them and update those filters and toggle through those filters in S1. And it's super cool. If you're a heavy dashboard user, you've got to get on this new filter criteria. And as Sam said, Trailhead is the place to go for everything. So go to Trailhead, go through, if you're thinking about Lightning, go through Lightning migration paths. If you are becoming a Rockstar admin, go finish all the admin trails and maybe start the developer trails. Trailhead is the place to go, especially to stay in touch with all these new features and with Lightning UI updates, and it's definitely the first stop to go to.
Yeah, and even if you've heard about a module and you're like, I went through this, and last winter it said to do it differently. If you go into Trailhead, you can read about the absolute newest, best way to do everything. We keep it up to date, or we don't. Chris does, and so does the docs team, but they keep it up to date with the most supported and best practices around Salesforce development.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sam. I mean, they're constantly adding new modules, right? So if you looked for something 2 months ago, it may be there now. So stay tuned for all those Trailhead updates. Go to the modules, browse the modules, because they are just constantly adding value and new content. So the only constant is change, just like Salesforce. So let's go ahead and switch over to questions. Now, we are looking at questions in the chat window. Please, please, please try to post to this group, in large part because this is the group where the PMs hang out and the release experts hang out, not just me and Sam. And so we want to make sure that those really valuable questions get answered for everyone in the community and they can see it. So,
absolutely. Sorry, I was just going to say, definitely, yes, please fill out this survey. Your feedback is really important to us. We want to know, what content you want to see in the future, what are other things that we could be doing better, that we did great, everything. And for anyone that wants the recording of this webinar or the slides or maybe the Q&A if your question doesn't get answered live, anyone that's registered for this webinar will get a link to a page that has all of that information accessible. And if you weren't registered for this webinar or a colleague wasn't, that link will be searchable on developer.salesforce.com also. Just look for the winter webinar or spring webinar in about a week. All right, Leanne, do you have any questions you want to go through first? I'm going to cut through after you.
So let's see, one of the questions that we got from a number of people during your Salesforce menu navigation demo was, can you assign navigation menus to multiple profiles, or can you have, and so the answer is yes, you can. When you create a menu navigation, a custom menu navigation, you can assign it to multiple profiles, but each profile can only have one menu navigation. So if I have an existing custom, like Sam's beer menu navigation that she built, and then if she were to go and create a new one and assign it to that same profile, the newest one would automatically be updated as the one that profile saw. Hope that answers the question.
I see a question here that's saying someone tried to use Lightning out and the Lightning component is defined, but they're getting an assertion that's failed, saying the abstract component can't be instantiated. Basically, the 404 error. If you're trying to use Lightning out and you're just trying to drop a component on a page, if you don't have that extra Lightning app that acts as the bridge to declare all the dependencies and extends Lightning out, then you'll get a 404 even though that Lightning component exists in your DE. So make sure that you create that app to act as a bridge between Lightning and Visualforce.
So I see a question about the DE org for Wave, and I know that the way that I got my DE org for Wave was to go through the Trailhead tutorials for Wave, because it sends you to the links to create not only a Wave org, but then also with data and an existing app. Sam, is that where you got your Wave org?
Right. So I just created a bit.ly. It's bit.ly/wave-de-org, all lowercase, and it's exactly that. You can go through Trailhead to find the link to sign up for a special Wave DE. We're working with the product team to possibly get this into the DE org, maybe it just by default, but in this case, you have to actually request a specific DE org with Wave in it. So check it out in Trailhead or go to bit.ly/wave-de-org.
Awesome. So I had a question about.
Someone asked is. Oops, sorry about that. Is the iframe, just the standard HTML iframe tag in JavaScript, is that also deprecated for Visualforce? Because Apex iframe is deprecated. So no, you can still use iframe inside of a Visualforce page that's used in Lightning Experience, and you can use it in Visualforce too. But if you're using Visualforce inside of Lightning Experience or Salesforce 1 and using just a standard HTML iframe, you might run into JavaScript errors, navigation issues, parent-child window problems. You're an iframe within an iframe, so you're like in uncharted territory.
One of the questions we got about global pick lists was, where do we go to create global pick lists? So if you go to Classic Setup and search for global, then let me just double check that. But if you go to Classic Setup and search for global, then that should bring you to that create screen. Now, that is one of the things that for setup you do have to go back to Classic for, but then you have access to that in Classic or Lightning when you're actually creating the pick list that's going to use those global values.
And one of the questions on here asked, do you suggest building Aura pages compared to classic Visualforce pages? And truthfully, the answer, unfortunately, is it really depends on your situation. And so if you have existing Visualforce pages that you say want to turn into Lightning components, maybe they make sense in the Lightning component context, then you can use Visualforce as a tool for porting that over into Lightning components and then also surfacing the components back in Classic again if necessary. But it's true, in some cases, you know, it might be faster, your Visualforce pages are existing and they might work the way they work and you don't want to port them into Lightning, and that's totally cool too. But as we're continuing to migrate the platform into Lightning Experience, you might want to consider things like JavaScript navigation or Salesforce Lightning Design System styling to make your Visualforce pages fit more in with the new Lightning Experience.
And actually, I realized I just misspoke. If you look here really quick, you have to search for pick list, not global. So it's called a global pick list, but it's just going to show up under pick list and setup. Just don't want to send you in the wrong direction. Let's see. Sam, any more questions? Let's see. I'm looking at the success group. So, sorry.
Go ahead,
I see a good question here about creating these pick list types in Lightning Experience. These are not Lightning specific features. So if you're creating, so they're available in Lightning, they're supported in Lightning. Those fields you can add to the page layouts. You know, those page layouts are supported in Lightning. But if you're creating a custom field on an account using a global pick list, that'll be available in setup as well, or in Classic as well. So it's not a setup or Classic or Lightning specific feature.
So I think that's all the time that we have for questions. We started about 8 minutes late, so it's been about an hour now. But any questions that you may have asked in the chat window that we haven't gotten to, we're going to put all of these questions along with the ones from the Success community into an FAQ, and that'll be included in the page that's sent out in the link with the slides and the recording. So that'll all be coming probably in about a week. And we will be working with some product experts to get anything that we haven't already answered and the things that we have answered. We'll have that all in the FAQ for you later. But thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that this was as fun for you as it was for us. And thanks, Leanne, for doing this with me. This was fun.
Great. Thanks, Sam, and thanks, everyone, for joining.
Bye.
Bye.